Hi everyone, Ms. Tech here. During the North American Stormblood media event, I had the honor and privilege of sitting down with Naoki Yoshida, director and producer of Final Fantasy XIV. In this video, we'll go through a few of the questions I asked and his responses. The transcript of my interview with yoshi-p is also available in the description below. Are there any customization options available in the future for class gauges or customization options for other parts of the UI, for example the raid or duty group of players? If there aren't any game-enabled customization options available, is there any consideration in allowing add-ons? In terms of the job gauge itself, at the launch of 4.0 Stormblood, the only thing you can customize will be the location of where the gauge is shown and the size of it. But a task for our future updates, we are trying to make a simplified version of each gauge, so that if you don't require the entire gauge to be shown and you want a more simplified version, you can switch to that. In terms of add-ons, a lot of people have mentioned about being able to have a DPS meter, and a lot of people have also gone against that, so I've basically given up on it. In terms of UI customization, you might be familiar with the gray color based UI, and we'll make it so that our players can choose which one to display on their screen, and we intend to provide more UI skins. With the release of Stormblood, will you keep with the 2 dungeons per patch or return to the previous 3 dungeon per patch cycle? It's actually going to be neither of those patterns. This is something we need to answer quite carefully and tread carefully as we answer the question. Of course, as you may already be aware with Final Fantasy XIV, there are a lot of different dungeons that are available, and we have amassed quite a number of this type of content. So our current vision is every even patch update, so 4.2, 4.4, patches where you're switching out item levels, that's where we'll have our 2 dungeon updates. For every odd patch update, we would do 1 dungeon, but also be adding brand new content instead. Looking at the data throughout our 3.x series, we have become able to obtain different elegant tomestones with many different types of content, not only through the dungeons, but with Wanderer's Tales and things like that. And so it's not as necessary to be running these expert dungeons. And so we thought that for these latter half patches, or odd patches, it might not be as necessary to have new dungeon content. So our thinking was that we would update with a dungeon as well as adding new content and allocating our costs to develop that. To double check and make sure we're on the same page, we're not decreasing anything in any way. We're just making sure we're providing ample content in a good amount, and we're also adding new content. Has there been any consideration in adding previous expert roulette dungeons into the expert roulette queue? There's actually a deliberate reason we do not add previous content. As your eye level does go up, going back to that previous content would shorten the time to clear that content significantly. When you do hit the roulette and you end up landing on a much more difficult dungeon, people may drop out seeing that it might take more time to get through those dungeons, and we want to avoid that type of situation. And so we're actually trying to make it so you don't have to be forced to go into the expert roulette every day, but still be able to obtain your tomestones through different content that will be available. You touched on the idea of increased eye level making old content too easy to speed through. Are there any plans of offering higher difficulty 4-man content similar to Mythic Plus or New Game Plus systems in other games? Perhaps offering diadem-style rewards, glamour, or vanity items as an incentive? I'm afraid we can't delve into the details right now, but as previously mentioned, we are allocating costs to deliver brand new content instead of having 2 dungeons and a patch update for our odd number patches. Whether that is a 4-man challenge, that is a 4-person challenge that is of a higher difficulty, or if it's another kind of content, we will find out at a later time when more information becomes available. But I have seen feedback from people that would like content that is very similar to floors 180 and beyond in Palace of the Dead, something that is a 4-player mid to hardcore difficulty content. I've heard that people do enjoy it and find it interesting. In Heaven's Word, we had an issue with the 2 primals Bismarck and Ravana, with Ravana offering superior loot than Bismarck at the time, and it seemed like a good chunk of the player base was able to go into Ravana without even really bothering with Bismarck, which is a shame since Bismarck was an awesome fight. Are there any plans in place to combat this in Stormblood with the 2 new primals coming out? Yes, we have addressed this issue, so please try out both primals, and hopefully this will also alleviate any match or queuing issues. And balance-wise, we made sure neither one is superior or inferior to the other. Are there any plans on changing the development cycle? In the past, you guys have done roughly 3 months per patch, and it seems to be working pretty well. Are you hoping to do the same thing again? How do you plan on remaining competitive in this MMO market? Looking at it from a player perspective of any MMO or an online game, I'm sure it's more desirable if your patch update schedule is quicker, and of course I would love to have a game that would update every month. But considering the content volume and how much content we are offering, and how much of that of our players want to play, I think it's also a balance that we have to look at. If we are updating so quickly and providing so much content, players might not be able to catch up or keep up with, things like my gear is not up to snuff, I can't take the time to play, that sort of thing. We don't want it rushed either. Looking at it from an overall perspective, I think think we should not shorten our current cycle of about 3 to 3.5 months for each major update to come out. We also have to consider time we need to allocate for QA of our main scenario. We need to have voiceovers to be recorded, things like that require consideration in terms of schedule. So I don't think it's realistic to shorten that cycle. But that being said, I think instead of rather having all of the content all available in a major update, I'm sure it might be beneficial to some of our players to have it kind of staggered and kind of have that sort of leaping in terms of updating. And in terms of keeping up with and staying competitive with other MMO titles, quite frankly, I don't see many other MMOs that are keeping up with this major update per 3 months or so. So keeping this pace and being able to maintain this pace properly, I think is very important for us. With the recent changes to server infrastructure and the recent creation of Crossworld Party Finder, are there any plans on eventually allowing cross-world play in the open world, or perhaps even cross-world without server group limitations? If we were to allow for players to join each other cross-world in the open areas, it would kind of defeat the purpose of having worlds to begin with. But that being said, the system and mechanics for being able to travel to a certain area cross-world are in-game. We are prepared to be able to work on that sort of modification. In the future, we may be able to consider setting it up so that, for example, if you wanted to teleport somewhere in Gridania, there might be an option to designate which world's Gridania you wanted to jump into. But if we were to have all of the players kind of concentrate or appear in one single world, our servers are not able to handle that. Even if it was one of those mega servers, I'm afraid it's not possible and we'd have to set limitations on how many people we're able to enter. But eventually, we do want to think about blurring those lines between the worlds and maybe perhaps even offering the ability to use different teleports to be able to jump across worlds. But we are approaching this one step at a time. For example, we're working on being able to add friends across world, and setting up link shells across worlds too. Next would be probably addressing free company options. And so, just like that, one step at a time, we do want to break down the walls between the worlds. With artifact gear being available at level 70, will it impact the value of crafted gear at all? Will the iLevels be similar, or will one be better than the other? Or is it a matter of having similar iLevels but different optimization? Previously in Heavensward, once you got to level 60, people obtained gear through dungeons, and the item levels between those who did obtain gear from different dungeon content were vastly different from those that did not. For the artifact gear for the different jobs at level 70, we've made it so you have a full set once you complete that level 70 job quest. Those who are level 70 Disciples of the Hand and the battle gear that they can create, the item levels for that gear will of course be higher. So if you're the type of player who's aiming for those savage raids and wanting to get there quickly, you will probably want to look into that crafted gear. And that concludes my interview with yoshi-p. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments or need anything elaborated on, let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.